Hello and welcome back to aud206. This is week 9 and we're going to jump into mixing our 5.1 project here in Audition. But before we do that, Eric in the forums had a great idea to kind of establish a bit of reality here before we jump into all this crazy digital stuff. Throw in some cars, some tire squeals, and maybe some motor acceleration, just to kind of give the sense that this is a real place before we start seeing all the video game stuff go crazy. And since I'm a sucker for collaboration, I think it's a great idea, and I figured we could add that in. So I went ahead and pulled 2 sound effects. I looked through the Adobe Audition library, and there's a couple tire squeals in there, but I found in my own collection, I found 2 that I liked a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more tracks here. And we'll drop, add 1, and then add 1 more to this stereo track. All right. Then we're going to import these files. They're they'll be included. They're the tire squeal and dragster. Drop these in. Still have that time stretch turned on. I'll turn that off. And just set this just right on the first frame. So let's give that tire squeal a listen. All right, the only thing I don't like about it is the stereo left to right. So we just trim this up here. So let me go back to, let's go back to waveform here. Stereo expander and just collapse this down to 0. That's great. I can maybe fade this out just a little bit because we're going to use our dragster sound here. That adds a bit of intensity, doesn't it? So, but times out almost perfectly. So we'll cut that right on the end of the picture. And I think I like that as our bass sound. So we'll start there. So now when you're doing surround, it's really important to think about your busing structure. From a standpoint of how you're going to get your deliverables out of the system, Audition supports something called batch export. A lot of systems actually support that now, but it's important to set up these buses so that when you render out your mixes, you don't have to sit there and hit solo on a couple tracks and say, okay, this is my voice track render. This is my music track render. This is my sound effects render. You know, you can set it up as a bus so that when you go to hit render, you only have to render physically once. The system will automatically add the names to each track, and then you just pass those off to the client. I just did 4 spots. Each spot had a stereo, surround, and web version for 3 different advertisers. So that's 4 times 3 times 3. So that's 36 different mixes, each one of those having composite mix, voiceover, dialogue, musics, sound effects, M&E, which is music and sound effects mixed together, MDE, which is music, dialogue, and effects together. So you can see how that gets a little crazy. And if you're spending all your time soloing out each track, a half-hour render can turn into a day's worth of work. So if you build the project ahead of time, you only have to hit render once. So we're going to build that now. One thing that Audition lacks a little bit is the ability to use a control room setup, and I'm going to use the master bus as my control room bus in that sense. And so if this were my setup at home, I have a sound card that I plug my speakers directly into the sound card. I don't have a control device, so to speak. So I actually need some kind of bass management utility to control my the bass from my main speakers going to the subwoofer. And Voxengo makes this this BMS utility. It's pretty inexpensive, but it automatically adjusts the 10 dB push going to the sub. You can define what output channel you're using for your LFE here, and then what mode it is, and you can set it to mix mode, or there's a few different modes. They don't change too much, but so this is a great little plugin. I'm not going to use it because it'll mess up the metering, and since you guys are listening to this in stereo and it's a 5.1 class, really the only way I can demonstrate things is how they move across the meter until you open up the project and start playing around with it yourself. So let's go back here. So let's go ahead and create some buses. I'm going to use this bus A that we've already built. Unfortunately, it's a stereo bus, so I'm gonna remove that and replace it with a 5.1 bus. So if I go to here, I'm going to add a bus. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a reverb bus because I'm going to use that for the tunnel effect. And then from there, I'll create a couple more 5.1 buses. One will be sound effects, since this whole thing is sound effects. But to demonstrate the other outputs, I'll just go ahead and create a couple more here. So this will be our music bus, for example, and then we'll go ahead and create one for voiceover. So in a typical project, you would have, maybe voiceover, maybe dialogue, sound effects, and music as your buses. So then these would then feed into what I'll call a mix bus. Just so we're all understanding the signal flow. And then our mix bus will then have all the limiting, maybe finalizing EQ, whatever we decide to do. And then the output of this mix bus will be our composite mix, and we'll use that out of there. And then we'll feed this bus here into our master bus. But while I'm here, I'll actually create another one. If you're doing stereo and 5.1 in the same project, you might decide to duplicate this again and call it, surround voiceover, surround music, surround sound effects, and then stereo voiceover, stereo music, stereo sound effects. You can build all that into the same project. So then you can output your stereo mix, your surround mix, and a web mix, or all the different versions in one pass. It's pretty quick. But here I'll go ahead and create a stereo mix bus, and I'll just call this a web mix. And we'll talk about that more later. But typically, spots are being sent out on TV as well as the web. So, and the web has a different level volume-wise. So we have all these mixes now. Now we need to route our channels, just like we did before, to these buses. So I'll go to sound effects. Or I'm in the wrong spot here. So we're going to route these to sound effects. Sound effects. And then if we had voiceover channels, they would be going to here. We'll route this to our mix bus. Do the same for music. Sound effects will go to mix bus. Mix will go to master, but then we'll also send it to web. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this up 12 dB to the web mix. The web mix, we don't want to go anywhere, so I'm just going to turn that off. So it's okay that the mix doesn't go out anywhere. Otherwise, we'd be adding on to ourselves. So you can see these are 5.1 channel buses here, which allow when when we go to the panner for these channels, the panner has a stereo to 5.1 panner that we can then move the signal around within the space because it's feeding from a stereo channel into a 5.1 bus. So all that's maintained. So let's give this a listen and make sure that our files are going to the sound effects and the mix bus right now. I can tell already that that new effect we put in is much too loud. Let's give that a try. Oh, went the wrong way. -12. Okay, so I do like that new file. It is quite a bit louder than the rest of the stuff. So let me give that another playback. So I think the general balance is feeling okay, actually. It's really just kind of panning the things around to kind of fill it out, the space. But one of the main things I'm feeling is a lack of this this presence of this tunnel. And so I'm going to use this reverb channel here, and I'm going to add the effects rack and the track. Exponential Audio makes this R2 surround, and they, if you haven't heard much about it, definitely check them out. This is a little bit more of an expensive reverb, but it's winning all kinds of awards. Everyone's using it. It's fantastic. I've been pretty much, going directly to it lately. But in here, I found under the effects, I found a preset that I kind of liked for this oil drum. And one of the really cool things about how this works is you can feed it a stereo input, and it'll create a 5.1 reverb for you. So it'll envelop you in the space, so to speak. So we have this set on our reverb track. So there's a few things I want to push into the reverb. Number one being our tire squeal. So if I go to the mixer track here, and we'll use send 1 as our reverb send. So go ahead and send this to the reverb. Now remember, our reverb is going into our mix master right now, but that's not what we want. We actually want this to go into our sound effects bus so that all of the sound effects, including the reverb, the reverbed sound effect is still part of our sound effects channel. It's still part of our sound effects split. Now, our sound effects split's going to sound a whole lot like our mix because it's the same thing. But if we had music and if we had voiceover, this particular reverb is being used exclusively for sound effects. So that way, any information coming out of this reverb is sound effects only. So feed that to the sound effects mix, then the sound effects bus goes to the mix, and so on. So go back over here. Oh, got to turn on got the reverb, got to turn it on, but we got to turn it up. So set to 0, and I'm just going to guess, but I'll probably want to turn this down just a little bit. So go ahead and solo that up. Now, because it's being routed there, it automatically solos this channel, which is really helpful. So you'll notice without the reverb, if I solo this track, it's a pretty mono stereo signal. But when I add the surround verb in, there's a bit of information going. So you see that quite a bit of information is going to the center channel. And I'm one to keep that pretty clean. So I want to actually switch this over to the phantom center mode. So that will keep things out of the center channel. There we go. So I think I want a little bit more of the reverb, to the point where I actually think I want all of the signal going to the reverb. Let's go. Yeah. Certainly favor the reverb over the original sound. And so to do this pretty cleanly, I can just switch this over to pre-fader so that the signal coming out of the channel goes over to the reverb before, well, it's not really affected by the fader. So I can pull the fader back like 12 dB, and that's not going to reduce the amount of send going to the reverb. So let me play that. See here, we're getting some of that nice tunnel-y sound effects. So I'm going to do the same thing for the engine sound. So pull this back, switch this over to pre-fader. Give it a send first and then switch it over. And then turn this up to 0. Let's give that a listen. Now the only problem is we have a 10-second commercial and our reverb is extending on beyond the desired length. So so you don't get this kickback by the editor saying, it ends too long. Just go ahead and drop in a point here at the end and then fade this out. All right. We can actually probably fade out the reverb once we clear the tunnel. So let's call it there. We just lose a little bit of that original sound. So we got to make up for it here. Just give this a little boost back. Nice. Great. So it's feeling nice and full, pretty big, pretty dynamic. So let's give this a listen. All right, so since we're using this as our bass sound, we want to make sure that we're in the right volume range, so to speak, for both our broadcast mix and our web mix. Because whether we like to or not, we have to mix to a meter. And fortunately, under special, there's a loudness radar meter. And this is just the TC Electronics way of showing the LKFS meter. As of last year, 2013, both the US and the European EBU both follow the same meter now. So under here, we can pick in the US, we have the American Television Standards Commission, and then in Europe they have the European Broadcast Union. So both the R128 LKFS-U and the ATSC A85 2013 revision are the same thing. So we can set to here. This meter also has some nice other meters for you to, you can use this for loudness metering in general, but I'll go ahead and use the A85LU. Under settings, I'm going to set my radar speed to 1 minute because we only have 10 seconds, so we'll actually see a little bit more. And that should do it. So how this meter works, if you're not familiar, you have to reset it every single time you play across something for it to register it. So we'll reset it and then hit play. Something seems off there. Let's try this one. All right, so minus 24 is our target. That's what we want to be at. So we're pretty close, except that we have a bunch more sounds to add into it. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more dynamic range to play with. So we'll close this out. I'll just drop this down to minus 14 for now. Just listen to that one more time. Maybe a touch less. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in a couple more pieces. We had this this hit at the beginning. I don't know if I want to keep that anymore. Yeah, we can get rid of that. And then we had this bass drop at the beginning as well. Adds a nice color, but this might be something that we want to push mostly into the sub versus our main speakers. So this is a good chance to play around with this. And under here, this LFE dial, this allows you to push more of that information into the subwoofer versus into your main speakers. So I definitely don't want any of this in the center channel, so I'm going to scoop that out. And this is a mono signal, but I want a piece of that coming out the left and the right speaker. So if I change the stereo spread, it'll push that mono signal around to different speakers. So I'll keep it at 30. All right, so let's give that a listen with our piece. Don't really feel like it's going out this sub. Just mute this reverb here for a sec. Okay, so we see it working here, whereas I think I had this backwards. So I think Audition does not work like Premiere. Premiere shows left, right, left surround, right surround, center LFE. I think this is showing left, right, center LFE, left surround, right surround, which means my reverb's going to the wrong channels. So if I slow these back up again, we'll take a listen. Yeah, so these should be going to left surround, right surround. Yeah. So I think I need to switch these to try that. Great. So put this back in. All right, so let's add in this one other piece down here and see how we're sitting. So I think this could benefit from being placed in that reverb as well. So go back over to our mixer and drop this into the reverb bus, turn this up. And let's try panning. So in here, you can actually push the send information to a different panner than your mains. So we can play around with pushing this maybe a little bit more around the side, somewhere in there. So it hits the reverb on the sides, but it still comes out mostly the front. The dry signal comes out mostly the front here. So as it passes through the whoosh's reverb is more in the rears. So we'll give that a listen. Of course, we're fading out of our reverb a little bit too soon for that to work. Cool, I like that. All right, so we got some busing set up, we got some reverb set up, and kind of filled out the beginning of our track here. So next week we're going to look at mixing this to the right level, getting all the rest of the stuff kind of put in its place. We need to pan a couple of these pieces around as this joystick comes out and comes around us, and then for these pieces to kind of be heard and kind of audible and sit on top, and then we need to export all this out for both our broadcast mix and our web mix. So I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.